My husband told his family, "Her postpartum depression is getting really bad. That's why I'm never home anymore." But the truth hit me hard when I realized he was using my painful pregnancy recovery as the perfect excuse to hide his affair behind my back. I forwarded his post to his mother, including images of him and his co-worker at 3 separate hotels. His entire family disowned him within 48 hours. I am a 28-year-old from Portland, and until 6 weeks ago, I believed I had a supportive husband who was simply struggling to adapt to fatherhood. Our daughter, Emma, arrived 4 months prior, following a challenging pregnancy that culminated in an emergency C-section. The recuperation was arduous, both physically and emotionally, yet I felt my husband, Jake, was understanding of the difficulties I was navigating as a new mother. Jake holds a position as a project manager for a construction firm and has always been accustomed to extended work hours and undertaking additional assignments. During my pregnancy, he assured me things would change once the baby was here. He spoke of his desire to be an engaged father and mentioned he would reduce his work commitments to assist with nighttime feedings and doctor appointments. I trusted him because he seemed genuinely enthusiastic about becoming a dad. The initial few weeks after Emma's birth were precisely as I anticipated, draining, overwhelming, but manageable with Jake's assistance. He took 2 weeks off work and was, in fact, quite excellent during that period. He managed diaper changes without complaint, brought me meals while I was nursing, and even woke up for some of the middle-of-the-night feedings so I could get some rest. I recall thinking we made a good team and that perhaps we would navigate this parenting journey together. However, something dramatically shifted once Jake returned to work. Instead of lessening his hours as he had promised, he began working even longer days. He would depart the house at 6 a.m. and often would not return until 9 or 10 p.m., claiming he had project deadlines and client meetings that could not be rescheduled. When I pointed out that these hours exceeded those before the baby's arrival, he would become defensive, stating he was working extra hard to provide for our expanding family. The most frustrating aspect was not merely his absence, but how he began treating me when he was home. Jake started behaving as if I were delicate and unstable, continually inquiring if I was feeling all right in a patronizing tone, and commenting on how I appeared stressed or overwhelmed. When I would voice frustration about being alone with a newborn for 14 hours a day, he would nod empathetically and utter phrases like, "I know this is truly difficult for you right now," as though my concerns were not legitimate complaints about his conduct. Jake also began canceling plans we had made and declining social invitations on my behalf. When his sister invited us to a family barbecue, he informed her I wasn't up for it without even consulting me. When my college roommate wished to meet the baby, Jake suggested we postpone because I was still adjusting. He was making decisions about my social life based on his assessment of my mental state, and it was infuriating. I began noticing other peculiar behaviors as well. Jake would take phone calls outdoors or in the garage, claiming they were work-related, but speaking in hushed tones that seemed more personal than professional. He would shower immediately upon returning home from work, even on days when he asserted he had been in meetings all day. His laundry habits also changed. He started doing his own washing instead of simply placing everything in the hamper as he used to. The breaking point occurred 3 weeks ago when Jake's mother contacted me on a Tuesday afternoon. Linda and I have always shared a positive relationship, and she was calling to check on my well-being with the baby. But instead of asking about Emma or my recovery, she launched into a gentle but worrisome discussion about postpartum depression and the importance of seeking help if I was struggling. "Honey, Jake told us you've been having a really hard time lately," Linda carefully stated. "He's worried about you, and frankly, so are we. He mentioned that you've been crying a lot and that you don't want to leave the house or see people. We think you should talk to your doctor about getting some support." I was completely bewildered because none of that was accurate. Yes, I was tired and adapting to life with a newborn, but I was not depressed or experiencing any type of mental health crisis. I had been taking Emma for walks in the neighborhood. I had met up with friends for coffee twice in the past month, and while I had moments of feeling overwhelmed, I was generally managing quite well. "Linda, I think there might be some misunderstanding," I said. "I'm not experiencing any of those problems. I'm tired, sure, but I'm not depressed or isolating myself." Where did Jake get that idea? There was an uncomfortable pause before Linda said, "Oh, well, maybe he's just being overly protective. You know how new fathers can worry. But he's been so concerned about leaving you alone that he's been staying late at work to finish projects quickly so he won't have to travel for work." She added, "He said you get anxious when he's not nearby." That is when I grasped what was happening. Jake was not working late due to project deadlines. He was leveraging my supposed mental health issues as an excuse to remain away from home, and he was telling his family that I was too unstable to be left alone, but also too fragile to have him around less. It was the perfect alibi that made him appear as a devoted husband navigating a difficult circumstance. After concluding the call with Linda, I decided to investigate. I began paying closer attention to Jake's work stories and verifying them against what I could confirm. When he claimed he was meeting with the Johnson project team on Thursday, I contacted his office and learned that project had been completed 2 weeks earlier. When he asserted he was having dinner with a potential client on Friday, I checked his company's social media and saw posts from that same client's event occurring across town. I also began tracking his location more diligently. Jake had always shared his location with me through his phone, likely because he never anticipated I would check it. What I discovered was unsettling. On the nights he claimed to be working late, his phone indicated he was at locations unrelated to his job: restaurants, a downtown hotel, an apartment complex across town that I had never heard him mention. The final piece of evidence emerged when I was doing laundry and found a receipt in Jake's jacket pocket. It was from an expensive downtown steakhouse, dated the same night he told me he was working through dinner on a project proposal. The receipt showed charges for 2 dinners, 2 glasses of wine, and dessert, certainly not a solo working dinner. But what truly broke my heart was what I uncovered when I decided to check if Jake had been posting online about our situation. I had always known his Reddit username because he used to show me amusing posts, and I decided to review his recent activity. What I found made me feel nauseous. Over the past 2 months, Jake had made dozens of posts in relationship advice forums, parenting groups, and mental health communities, all portraying me as a wife suffering from severe postpartum depression who was making his life unbearable. He depicted himself as a devoted husband struggling to support a partner who was emotionally unstable, irrationally angry, and unwilling to seek help. In one post titled, "My wife's postpartum depression is destroying our marriage," Jake wrote, "She cries constantly, accuses me of not helping enough even though I'm working overtime to pay for her therapy and medication, and gets angry when I try to give her space to rest. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells all the time. How do I help someone who doesn't want help?" Another post stated, "My wife became a completely different person after having our baby. She's suspicious and paranoid, questions everything I do, and makes me feel guilty for working to support our family. I've tried suggesting couples counseling, but she says I'm the problem. I'm starting to think I need to protect myself and my daughter from her instability." The comments on these posts were heartbreaking to read. Hundreds of people were offering Jake sympathy and counsel for dealing with his mentally unwell wife. People were commending him for his patience and suggesting he document my behavior in case he needed to pursue custody of Emma. Some were even recommending he consider separation for his own mental well-being. But the most detrimental posts were the ones where Jake was soliciting advice about whether he was wrong for seeking emotional support from a female friend while his wife was experiencing a crisis. He described having a close friendship with a coworker named Sarah, who was helping him cope with the stress of his home situation. He inquired whether it was inappropriate to have dinner with Sarah or spend time texting with her about his problems. Reading those posts, I realized Jake had been systematically ruining my reputation online while constructing a narrative that vindicated whatever relationship he was having with this Sarah person. He was crowdsourcing permission to be unfaithful to his wife by convincing strangers that I was mentally unstable and emotionally abusive. I spent the next 3 days taking screenshots of every single post and comment. I also began trailing Jake more closely, and on Thursday evening, I uncovered the truth I had been dreading. Using Find My Phone, I tracked Jake to a hotel downtown where he had claimed to be meeting with a client. I drove to the hotel and waited in the parking lot until I saw Jake and a blonde woman I did not recognize walking out together, holding hands and kissing before entering separate cars. I followed the woman to her apartment and photographed her license plate. A quick social media search revealed her name was Sarah Martinez, and she worked for the same construction company as Jake. Her Instagram was filled with recent photos of dinners, flowers, and romantic dates that clearly showed Jake in the background or reflection, though she had been careful not to tag him directly. Reviewing Sarah's posts, I could see the relationship had been developing for months. There were photos of work dinners and company events that aligned perfectly with nights Jake had told me he was working late. She posted about falling for someone unavailable and receiving flowers for my favorite project manager. The timeline indicated their relationship had begun during my pregnancy and intensified after Emma was born. Friday morning, while Jake was at work, I compiled everything I had discovered into a comprehensive email: screenshots of his Reddit posts, photos of him with Sarah at the hotel, evidence of his falsehoods about work events, and a timeline demonstrating how he had been exploiting my postpartum period to justify his affair. I sent this email to Linda, Jake's father, his sister, and his brother. I also sent it to my own parents and my sister so they would know the truth about what had been happening. The response was swift and devastating for Jake. Linda called me within an hour, weeping and apologizing for believing Jake's accounts of my mental health. She said the family had been planning an intervention to persuade me to seek treatment, and they were horrified to learn that Jake had been lying to them while cheating on his postpartum wife. Jake's father contacted him at work and told him not to come to Sunday dinner until he could explain himself like a man instead of a liar. His sister sent him a text message stating, "I can't believe you made us think Emma's mom was crazy while you were running around with another woman. You're disgusting." His brother was apparently even more direct, telling Jake he was dead to the family until he rectified the situation he had created. But the true justice came when I decided to post my own response on Reddit. I located every forum where Jake had been lying about me and posted a detailed refutation with evidence. I included screenshots of his posts alongside photos of him with Sarah, documentation of his falsehoods about work, and a timeline showing how he had used my pregnancy and postpartum period to justify his affair. The response was immediate and overwhelming. People who had previously offered Jake sympathy were appalled to discover they had been manipulated into supporting a cheating husband. Several users who recalled his posts reached out to apologize for the advice they had given him. The moderators of multiple forums banned Jake's account and pinned my post as an illustration of how people manipulate online communities. Jake arrived home Friday evening to find his bags packed and a printed copy of the divorce papers I had filed that afternoon. He attempted to deny everything at first, claiming the photos were taken out of context and that Sarah was merely a friend helping him cope. When I showed him the screenshots of his Reddit posts, he became defensive and angry. "You invaded my privacy," he exclaimed. "Those posts were my way of getting support during a difficult time." "Difficult time?" I inquired. "You mean the difficult time of cheating on your wife while she recovered from childbirth and telling the internet she was mentally unstable?" Jake tried to reverse the narrative, claiming that my detective work proved I was paranoid and controlling, just as he had described in his posts. He said any normal wife would trust her husband instead of tracking his location and checking his social media activity. Normal husbands don't lie to their families about their wives having mental breakdowns while they're having affairs, I retorted. Normal husbands don't crowdsource justification for cheating on Reddit. The conversation concluded with Jake moving in with his brother temporarily, since his parents had made it clear he was not welcome at their house until he made things right with me and Emma. Sarah apparently ended things with him that same weekend, likely because she had not intended to be the other woman in such a public scandal. Update 1. It has been 2 weeks since I discovered Jake's Reddit posts and confronted him about the affair. The reaction from both our families and the online community has been immense, and I wanted to provide an update on subsequent events. First, the legal situation. I met with a divorce attorney the Monday after I asked Jake to leave, and she stated I have an extremely compelling case for both divorce and full custody. Jake's own Reddit posts provide documented evidence of him lying about my mental health and using our daughter as a justification for his affair. The attorney said his attempts to portray me as an unfit mother while he was cheating could actually work against him in custody proceedings. Jake has been attempting damage control all week. He deleted his Reddit accounts after my post gained attention, but it was too late since I had already screenshotted everything. He also tried to convince his family that I had misinterpreted his posts and that he had been exaggerating his concerns about me to gain better online advice. His mother quickly dismissed that. "You told us she was having a mental breakdown and couldn't be left alone with the baby," Linda told him. "You made us think she needed psychiatric intervention. That's not exaggerating. That's lying about serious mental health issues for your own benefit." The repercussions at Jake's workplace have also been significant. Apparently, word spread about his Reddit posts and the affair with Sarah, and several co-workers have come forward to state they had suspected something was amiss but had not wished to become involved. Sarah was transferred to a different department, and Jake is facing a disciplinary review for conducting a personal relationship that created a hostile work environment. But the most gratifying consequence has been observing Jake realize that no one believes his victim narrative anymore. He attempted posting a response on Reddit claiming I had manipulated the evidence and that he was the true victim of an abusive wife who violated his privacy. The response was brutal. People condemned him for attempting to gaslight an entire online community, and his posts were downvoted into oblivion. Several users who had initially offered Jake's sympathy came forward to share how betrayed they felt by his manipulation. One woman wrote, "I spent time writing thoughtful advice for a man I thought was struggling with his wife's mental health crisis. Finding out he was actually cheating while his wife recovered from childbirth makes me sick. This is exactly why people don't trust men who claim their wives are crazy." Jake has been requesting to see Emma, and I have been permitting supervised visits at his brother's house. During one of these visits, Jake tried to persuade me to attend couples counseling, claiming we could work through this if I just gave him a chance to explain. I told him there was nothing to work through. He had systematically lied about my mental health to justify cheating, and that was not something you could fix with therapy. I made mistakes, he said, but I was overwhelmed and didn't know how to handle everything. So was I replied. I was recovering from major surgery while caring for a newborn. The difference is I didn't lie to our families about your mental health or start an affair. The dialogue with my own family has been restorative. My parents had been worried about me based on things Jake had told them, and they were relieved to learn that I was actually managing new motherhood quite well considering the circumstances. My sister has been staying with me and assisting with Emma, and having that support has made me realize how much simpler everything could have been if Jake had truly been the partner he pretended to be. I have also been receiving messages from women who read my Reddit posts and recognized similar patterns in their own relationships. Apparently, using postpartum depression as a cover for infidelity is more prevalent than I had realized. Several women shared stories about partners who had claimed they were experiencing mental health crises while actually cheating or planning to leave. One message particularly resonated. My ex-husband told everyone I had severe postpartum anxiety and couldn't be trusted alone with our twins. I found out later he'd been having an affair with his secretary and was trying to build a case for custody by making me seem unstable. Thank you for sharing your story because it helped me realize I wasn't crazy for feeling like something was wrong. Jake's attempts to restore relationships with his family are not progressing well. His sister told me he appeared at her house last weekend attempting to explain his perspective, but she asked him to leave after he continued to blame me for compelling him to seek support elsewhere. His father apparently told him that real men don't abandon their wives after childbirth and then lie about it to cover their tracks. The most challenging aspect of this entire situation has been dealing with the emotional manipulation Jake continues to attempt. He has been sending me lengthy text messages about how much he misses his family and how he is willing to do whatever it takes to fix things. But these messages are always followed by subtle attempts to shift blame back to me or minimize his actions. In one text, he wrote, "I know I handled things poorly, but I felt like I couldn't talk to you about how overwhelmed I was feeling. Maybe if we'd communicated better, none of this would have happened. I showed this to my therapist. Yes, I actually am seeing someone now, ironically, and she pointed out how Jake was still trying to make his affair partly my fault." Update 2. 6 weeks have passed since I uncovered Jake's Reddit deception, and the situation has continued to develop in ways I did not foresee. I wanted to share another update because several people have inquired about the legal proceedings and Jake's ongoing attempts to control the narrative. The divorce is progressing smoothly. Jake initially tried to fight for 50-50 custody, claiming he was a devoted father who had been unfairly characterized by my vindictive reaction to his infidelity. However, his own Reddit posts proved to be incredibly detrimental to his case. His attorney apparently advised him to accept supervised visitation and weekend custody after reviewing the evidence. What truly damaged Jake's position was a post I had screenshotted where he had written, "Sometimes I wonder if I'm even ready to be a father. My wife expects me to help with nighttime feedings and diaper changes, but I work long hours and need my sleep. She acts like taking care of our baby is a two-person job, but I think she's just overwhelmed and needs to learn better time management." The family court judge was not impressed with Jake's attitude toward parenting responsibilities, especially when contrasted with his claims that he was working late to provide for his family. The judge noted that Jake seemed to view childcare as entirely his wife's responsibility, while simultaneously claiming she was too mentally unstable to handle it alone. Jake's relationship with his family continues to deteriorate. His parents invited me and Emma to Sunday dinner last week, but specifically informed Jake he was not welcome until he stopped lying and began taking responsibility. During the dinner, Linda apologized again for believing Jake's stories about my mental health. "I feel terrible that we were planning to confront you about getting psychiatric help," she said. "Jake was so convincing about how worried he was about you. We thought we were helping, but we were actually enabling him to continue his affair while making you feel isolated." Linda also revealed that Jake had been laying the groundwork for his deception much earlier than I had realized. Apparently, he had been making comments about my mood swings and difficulty adjusting since Emma was born, gradually building a narrative that I was struggling mentally before he ever posted anything online. He'd call me after visiting you and say things like, "She seemed really overwhelmed today," or "I'm worried about how she's handling everything," Linda explained. Looking back, I realized he was training us to expect problems, so we believe him when he claimed you were having a breakdown. The manipulation was even more calculated than I had initially understood. Jake had not just been covering for his affair. He had been systematically undermining my credibility with our family so that if I ever discovered his cheating, no one would believe my side of the story. Meanwhile, The Reddit community's response to Jake's behavior has been fascinating to observe. My original post about discovering his deception has been shared across multiple platforms and has apparently become a case study in online manipulation. Several relationship bloggers have written articles about how people use mental health stigma to justify their poor behavior and control narratives about their relationships. One article that particularly resonated with me was titled "The Postpartum Gaslighting Playbook: How Cheating Partners Use Mental Health Stigma to Avoid Accountability." The author interviewed several women who had experienced similar situations where their partners had used their postpartum period as cover for infidelity or abandonment. Jake apparently reads some of these articles and was enraged about being publicly disgraced for what he called private relationship problems. He sent me a series of angry text messages demanding that I stop discussing our affairs online and threatening to sue me for defamation and harassment. I forwarded these texts to my attorney, who chuckled and pointed out that truth is a complete defense against defamation claims. He documented his own poor behavior on Reddit, she said. You can't defame someone by sharing their own words. The most significant development has been the impact on Jake's professional life. Word about his Reddit posts has spread throughout his company, and several female coworkers have complained to HR about feeling uncomfortable working with someone who publicly described his wife as mentally unstable while having an affair. Jake's supervisor called him in for a meeting last week and apparently told him that his behavior had created a hostile work environment and damaged the company's reputation. While Jake was not terminated, he was passed over for a promotion he had been expecting and was informed that his conduct would be considered for future advancement opportunities. Sarah, his affair partner, has apparently left the company entirely, according to office gossip that filtered back to me through mutual acquaintances. She was mortified when Jake's Reddit posts became public because they made her appear as though she had knowingly participated in manipulating a postpartum mother. She had apparently believed Jake's stories about my mental health and felt exploited when she realized he had been lying to her too. The financial implications of the divorce are working out better than I had anticipated. Because Jake's affair and deception are well documented, and because he neglected his family responsibilities while lying about the reasons, I am likely to receive spousal support and a larger share of our marital assets. My attorney says Jake's behavior constitutes both adultery and emotional abuse, which significantly strengthens my position. Jake has been attempting to negotiate a settlement that would avoid a public trial, presumably because he does not want his Reddit posts read aloud in open court. However, I am not feeling particularly generous about protecting his reputation anymore. If he wants to avoid public embarrassment, he should have considered that before posting lies about my mental health on the internet. I have also been contacted by a local news reporter who is working on a story about online manipulation and domestic abuse. Apparently, my situation has sparked interest in how social media platforms can be used to isolate and gaslight victims of emotional abuse. I am considering participating in the interview because I think it is important for people to understand how these tactics operate. The personal healing process has been more positive than I had expected. Therapy has been incredibly beneficial, not because I was actually suffering from postpartum depression as Jake claimed, but because processing this level of betrayal and manipulation requires professional support. Emma is flourishing, and I am managing single parenthood much better than I thought I would. Update 3. 3 months have passed since I uncovered Jake's elaborate Reddit deception, and I wanted to share a final update on how everything has concluded. The response to my story has been overwhelming, and I have learned a great deal about how common this type of manipulation truly is. The divorce was finalized last week. Jake ultimately accepted a settlement that grants me primary custody of Emma, our house, and substantial spousal support. His attorney strongly advised against proceeding to trial after reviewing the evidence, particularly Jake's own Reddit posts where he documented his lies and manipulation tactics. During the settlement negotiations, Jake's lawyer tried one last time to argue that his Reddit posts were taken out of context and that he had been venting rather than actually lying about my mental health. My attorney responded by reading several of his posts aloud, including the one where he had asked whether it was normal for a wife to become paranoid and controlling after having a baby and whether he should document her behavior in case he needed to protect our daughter from me. Your client didn't just vent online, my attorney told Jake's lawyer. He created a false narrative about his wife's mental health to justify abandoning his family and having an affair. These posts show premeditation and a pattern of emotional abuse that continued for months. Jake signed the papers without uttering a word to me. He appeared defeated and angry, but I think he finally realized that his attempts to control the narrative had completely backfired. His plan to portray me as mentally unstable while positioning himself as a suffering husband had instead created a permanent record of his manipulation and lies. The professional consequences for Jake have been more severe than I initially expected. While he was not fired from his job, he was demoted and his security clearance was revoked due to trustworthiness concerns. Apparently, his employer decided that someone willing to systematically lie about his wife's mental health could not be trusted with sensitive client information. Jake has also been struggling to find new employment. Several potential employers have apparently found his Reddit posts during background checks, and the story has been covered in local media as an example of online manipulation and domestic abuse. His reputation in our professional community is essentially ruined. The impact on his family relationships has been permanent. Jake's parents told me they have decided to maintain a relationship with Emma and me while severing ties with Jake until he demonstrates genuine remorse and change. His sister said she cannot trust someone who would lie about a new mother's mental health to conceal an affair. What you did to Emma's mom while she was recovering from childbirth is unforgivable, Linda told Jake during what turned out to be their last conversation. You made us believe she was mentally ill while you were cheating on her. That's not something a good man does, and it's not something a good father does. Perhaps most gratifying has been observing Jake's attempts to rebuild his reputation fail repeatedly. He tried creating new Reddit accounts to tell his side of the story, but users quickly identified him and exposed his continued lies and manipulation. He has apparently also tried dating, but word about his behavior has spread enough that several women have told me they specifically avoided him after learning about the situation. The media attention has been surreal but positive. My story was featured in a major article about digital domestic abuse, and I have been contacted by researchers studying how abusers use online platforms to isolate and gaslight their victims. Apparently, Jake's tactics were textbook examples of what experts call digital intimate partner abuse. Dr. Jennifer Martinez, a researcher at the University of Washington who studies online manipulation, told me that Jake's behavior was particularly sophisticated because he had used mental health stigma to make me seem unreliable while crowdsourcing validation for his affair. Abusers often try to make their victims seem crazy or unstable, Dr. Martinez explained. But using Reddit to systematically document false claims about postpartum depression while building justification for infidelity represents a new level of calculated manipulation. I have been invited to speak at a conference about domestic violence next month, and I am considering writing a book about the experience. Several literary agents have reached out after reading the media coverage, saying there is strong interest in stories about modern forms of emotional abuse and digital manipulation. The online response continues to be incredible. I have received hundreds of messages from women who have experienced similar situations, partners who use their postpartum period, mental health struggles, or other vulnerabilities as cover for infidelity or abandonment. Many of them said reading my story helped them recognize that they were not crazy for feeling like something was wrong in their relationships. One message that particularly moved me came from a woman whose husband had used her anxiety disorder as justification for having an affair. He told everyone I was too unstable to be a good wife, and I started believing him. Seeing how Jake manipulated you helped me realize that my ex was using my mental health against me too. Thank you for showing me that I wasn't the problem. I have also heard from men who said my story helped them recognize manipulative behavior in their own relationships or made them more aware of how mental health stigma can be weaponized against vulnerable partners. Emma is now 7 months old and absolutely thriving. She is a happy, healthy baby who seems completely unaffected by the drama that surrounded her early months. Jake sees her for supervised visits every other weekend, but he has shown little interest in being an active father. He usually returns her early and often seems more interested in complaining about his situation than actually spending time with his daughter. I am doing well personally and professionally. The marketing firm where I work has been incredibly supportive throughout the divorce process, and I recently received a promotion. I have also started dating someone new, a single father who thinks my story about standing up to Jake's manipulation is inspiring rather than vindictive. The financial situation has worked out better than I had hoped. Between the divorce settlement, spousal support, and child support, Emma and I are financially secure. I have also received offers for paid speaking engagements and writing opportunities that could provide additional income. Looking back, I am grateful that I discovered Jake's Reddit posts when I did. If I had not found them, he might have continued his manipulation for years, possibly convincing our families that I actually did need psychiatric intervention. The evidence I gathered not only proved my sanity, but also protected Emma from a father who was willing to lie about her mother's mental health for his own convenience. The experience has taught me valuable lessons about trusting my instincts and documenting concerning behavior. I almost convinced myself that I was being paranoid when I started investigating Jake's stories, but my gut feeling that something was wrong turned out to be completely accurate. To anyone reading this who feels like their partner is making them question their own sanity or using their vulnerabilities against them, trust your instincts, document everything, and remember that someone who truly loves you will not use your mental health, medical recovery, or other challenges as weapons against you. Jake's plan to use my postpartum period as cover for his affair ultimately ruined his reputation, his family relationships, and his career. Sometimes the truth has consequences, and sometimes those consequences are exactly what someone deserves. The woman I am now would never tolerate being gaslighted about my mental health while my partner cheated on me. I am stronger, more confident, and infinitely better off without someone who would lie about my sanity to justify his betrayal. Emma deserves better than a father who would manipulate her mother's postpartum recovery for his own selfish purposes, and I deserve better than a husband who would crowdsource permission to abandon his family.